Y seguimos avanzando. Tenemos el gusto de contar.
Now we're going to be hearing from someone representing the UNESCO's Office for Climate Education. The UNESCO Office for Climate Education is an international initiative for climate change education that develops various materials to apply in secondary and high school classrooms. Some of them can be linked to STEAM education, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. They also adapt long and complex reports into a language that teachers understand and can use. We have Lydie Lescarmontier today. She is a glaciologist by training, specialized in the functioning of Antarctic emissary glaciers, and during her research career she worked with the French National Research Institute and the Australia National University to understand better the effect of climate change on the Antarctic ice sheet. From 2015 to 2017, she was vice president of the French Committee of the Association of Early Career Polar Scientists, promoting education and science in the polar regions. And today she is a young researcher representing the French National Committee of Research in the Arctic and Antarctic, as well as a polar guide in the Arctic and Antarctic, which is wonderful. In 2018, she joined the Office for Climate Education team as a scientific officer. Her mission is to coordinate the production of educational resources of the OCE and its network, as well as to participate in the professional development of teachers. Thank you very much for being with us today. The floor is all yours.
Y buenos días a todos.
Good morning to you all.
Skipped to English this morning, so I'm really sorry for being the one who doesn't speak Spanish. I'm really working on that. But the idea today of that presentation was to show you what we're doing at the Office for Climate Education, the resources and professional development we are creating for teachers, but also to explain you a bit more about the way we're working, why we're doing that, what these international initiatives, so you can also see from your side how you can join us and be part of that OCE network. So by training, I'm a glaciologist. I'm coming from the researcher side. And I found out after 10 years of research on climate change that actually education was really a key to make a change today. And I was much more efficient explaining what is happening and what the impact of climate change that actually making science. So I'm not saying that we don't need scientists, but I think today, as a way to mitigate and adapt to climate change, we really need to work on education and at an early stage. And this is why I joined the OCE 3 years ago. So what's the OCE, and what is the context in which that foundation, that NGO, has been developed? I'm pretty sure that you're all aware of the Article 12 of the Paris Agreement that is actually enhancing the fact that we need climate change education, we need training, we need public awareness, public participation, access to information to really find solutions and work on that mitigation and adaptation aspects. The context is broader than this article. There are, of course, the SDGs, and also a statement from the Academy of Sciences, the AAP. It's a global network of academies, also stating this importance of education. So, to answer that need, the OCE was created in March 2018 in Paris, and it was at the same time an idea from scientists, from people from the IPCC, but also from the Academy of Sciences in France. So we are under the aegis of the foundation that is called La Main la Pâte. That is a foundation doing also education, but in science in general. And our founding members are a number of institutions in France that are quite known, like Météo France, Institute for the Research and the Development, Météo and Klimas, and of course the IPCC, the PEC in Germany, and the EAP. But we also have a number of private funders and financiers. So what are the objectives of the OCE? So first, we target teachers, but teachers working with students from 9 to 15 years old, so from primary and secondary schools. We target developing and developed countries, and we work more and more actually in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, and in Africa. We produce resources on climate change, but we also work on the professional development aspect to help teachers using that resources and improving their knowledge, their competencies in general related to climate change. The originality of the work of the OCE is first the involvement of the scientific community, because today we find a lot of resources on climate change, but for us, and because we want to also target curricula and education at an early stage, we wanted to make sure that all the information that we produce is actually validated by scientists. That's also why the OCE that is based in Paris is in the Sorbonne University, so we get access to all the experts that are working, for example, with the IPCC, and who are here to say, okay, this is okay, your simplification on that scientific information is right, but that one is not, so you have to work on that. We also have the support of the science academies and a number of laboratories. The other aspect of it is we really work closely with the IPCC, and we are in phase with their reports. I'm pretty sure you heard about the release of the RA6 in August this year, giving the last results related to climate change. So the idea for us is really to follow the rhythm of these reports and also to give us a kind of frame on the topics we want to cover, because as you know, climate change is a very broad area and it's a lot of disciplines, and using that report was a way to say for us, okay, first we're gonna work on ocean and cryosphere, then we will develop the land aspects, etc. We also use a systemic approach, so we start producing the resources, then professional development, but we also work a lot on the network to make sure that all the partners who are involved into that OCE work share the good practices, share the resources, can work on adapting them and really make their own. Our resources are free, multilingual, so we develop everything in French, English, Spanish, and German, and also open source, because if we want to develop, especially developing country, we have to make sure that they can access information quickly, they don't need to pay for it, and the multilingual aspect is also really, really important. Working in Latin America, we see that if you don't produce resources in Spanish, for example, it won't be used. Then we work a lot on the international cooperation, and science is really important, but also pedagogy, because climate change is a very difficult topic, especially for very young kids. And the pedagogy is important as a methodology, but also as a way to lead students to solutions, to really lead them to projects, to help them developing a way to learn more than just having the information. And last, we also work a lot on the climate action, and all the resources we are producing have a first main part on understanding climate change, but the second one, and a very strong one, on how to find solutions at the scale of a young student. So our network is really important for us because it's not the small team in Paris of 7 people that will be doing this kind of huge work, but what we do is, like I told you, we target teachers who work with young students, but through that we mainly target teachers trainers because it's a way for us to disseminate the information. So we do a lot of trainings, for example, in Latin America, and then our partners join us, organize a training with us, and then they are responsible of their own resources, own trainings, and then they can work with their teachers in their country. We have a committee, a scientific and pedagogical committee, that is validating all the resources we are producing on that scientific aspect, but also on the pedagogical one. So they give the OC stamps on what we are doing or not. As I told you, we're in Paris, and something I haven't mentioned too is we were created in 2018, but in 2020 we became a UNESCO Category 2 center. So we also have that UNESCO stamp that is really helpful actually to work in foreign countries. So our partners, we have partners a bit everywhere. I think that map was updated when we had 60. I think we are up to 70 now. Of course, some of them are really much more involved than others, especially in Southeast Asia and Latin America. We also have a very strong project in Latin America, in Mexico, Colombia, Chile, Peru, Ecuador, where our partners use our resources and adapt them to their local context to make their own. Before going a bit in detail into our work, I wanted just quickly to come back on the science, because of course I'm a scientist, so I have to present a few things, but also to include that human rights aspect, which is actually something really new for us. And this conference is a way also for us to think about that, because that's true that for a very long time climate change science has been attributed to physics, to natural sciences, but we see that we have to give a face to these issues because we are the first one concerned. And that human rights aspect is, for me, the core of what we have to do, and really the last aspect of that climate change challenge. These are the graphics that I got from the last IPCC reports, and they really made an emphasis on showing that climate change is really something induced by human and by our greenhouse gases emission. And once again, they produce this kind of graph that we have seen actually for quite a long time, but it came back anyway because it's still something that is that needs to be shown. So on the graphic on the right hand side, you see the increase of the temperature as observed today, and that would be simulated if we only had any natural aspects of the variation of the climate. In the first one, something also quite interesting is that kind of graphic showing an increase as an effect of our activity was more related before to CO2 emission. I'm pretty sure you all know that graph showing over 400,000 years the variation of the CO2 and a very large increase in the 150 years after the Industrial Revolution. But here you can see the increase of temperature, and we reached 1 degree in 2018, and we are now at 1.1 degrees. So the 1.5 degrees increase, that is what we want to reach at the maximum, is actually very close from us and is happening much earlier than what we're expecting. So this was a very strong aspect of that last report, is warming is more intense and more rapid than what we thought. Here you have the observed change on the top of the 1 degree global warming, so what we're knowing today, and the simulated one, which are really close. And then you have different kind of scenarios, because a large part of the work of the IPCC is to develop different models with different kind of emissions, showing the most optimistic ones, so 1.5 degrees, and the most pessimistic one, which are actually the one we're targeting today, with 4 degrees global warming. In the first case, we see that, of course, we're going to have an increase of the temperature everywhere, especially in the polar regions. That will, of course, have an impact in our local climate, but also on sea level rise, on biodiversity. And of course, yeah, the Paris Agreement stopping at 2 degrees global warming. And today, I think we're aiming at about 3 degrees global warming if we don't put in place very strong policies. What about precipitation change? So we have the same kind of scenarios with the 3 different ones. For what we see is through the warming, we have an acceleration of the water cycle, and we have very strong precipitation close to the equator, but we have also a very large decrease and droughts close to the subtropic regions. So in some places, it's going to rain much more, and in some other, really less. And of course, that is going to have a strong impact, the temperature plus water cycle, on the agricultural and ecological droughts around the world. So we see that most places, we have a very strong increase of that drought. And it, of course, impacts directly the feeding and the production. So to sum up, climate change will impact directly and indirectly of an array of internationally guaranteed human rights. It particularly affects the most vulnerable, which are the ones that are most exposed, but also the ones who are the poorest. And the most important threats are the increase of extreme events through heat waves, through floodings, which first impact the harvests and therefore the right to feed and adequate living standards. So of course, other human rights are targeting, but the main ones are really linked to that extreme events increase. Then it might, of course, create climate migration, geopolitical destabilization that will also affect human rights. So, yeah, there is a very strong implication into these 2 aspects. Now I will come back, I will leave the science and come back on what we're doing and on our workshops. So we work with teachers, but especially teachers trainers, a bit everywhere. So this is a picture from a training in Indonesia, in Bandung, and the idea of this workshop that actually are quite long. We need at least 4 or 5 days to really go through all the scientific aspects, but also the methodological ones, is first understanding complex system, because you know climate science is a lot of different topics, and when you work with teachers, especially working with young children, they don't really have a scientific background, so we have to help them working on that. Climate change topics is also very linked to critical thinking. So how to know which information is right or not. There is so much going on in the media today, and we might be getting lost. And we want really to help students observing, trying to understand by themselves, and being able to identify different kind of sources for an information, and really being able to answer a question they don't always know. Then use the research approach. Develop with them experiments, which is a very good way to have them involved also, and not just giving them information, but having them really developing this competence of the research, experimenting, and trying to identify a question and an answer. The work on modeling. We've seen previously that the modelization is a very strong aspect to climate change because of that IPCC work. So it's a way also for them to understand how science is created, and it's really linked to that critical thinking aspect. Today we hear a lot climate skepticism related to the fact that scientists don't know always what they are talking about. There are uncertainties in what they are saying, but understanding how a model is done is also a way to answer this kind of questions. In the resources we're developing, we like to also create different kind of way to talk about climate change through games, through testimonials, debates, etc. We also want, and it's also linked to that aspect of climate justice, helping the most vulnerable, and develop the empathy, because climate change is something we're all concerned, and if we don't want to do it for us, if we have to do it for others as well. Then that focus on solution that is so important when we work with kids, to avoid the anxiety, to avoid the catastrophism. Then thinking about the future in a changing world, also trying to understand that we have to adapt, because climate change is something now that is irreversible. Acting in schools and involving not just the school, but also the families and the communities in general through the students. So concerning the resources, like I've told you, we base our work on the IPCC reports. It's a very good basis for us to use the report and say, okay, what we can take from that, and how we can actually get into the classroom with this kind of information. So from now, we have been working on 2 special reports from the IPCC, actually on 3, but it's not released yet. But we work on the global warming of 1.5 degrees. So that report focuses on the importance of sticking to 1.5 degrees global warming compared to the 2 degrees of the Paris Agreement. So showing how 0.5 degrees of warming can really change things. And the second special report was based on the ocean and cryosphere in a changing climate. And from there, we produced 2 summaries for teachers. So we use that information and we make it accessible to teachers so they can get in the classroom, can understand that information that is not easy to access, even for policymakers, especially for policymakers, I would say. And then from there, they will have graphics, they will have infographic explaining the different scientific link, especially for the ocean, where we see there is a strong relation between the ice, the ocean, the color of these regions, sea level rise, etc. We also develop a number of class activities. So if the teacher wants to work on that report for a lesson, it can use some question or some ideas of experiment in the classroom. And it's very nice for them to feel connected to that up-to-date science, to also the actuality, because today we hear a lot about these reports, and it's very nice for the teachers to feel involved and saying, okay, I understand that and I'm able to teach that in my classroom. We also worked on the lesson plan, so this is 250 pages with 2 large parts. The first one really based on the understanding. So we have a scientific background, what you need to know before starting. Then a pedagogical background, so developing all that active pedagogy aspect, the project aspects, how to talk about climate change in the classroom with young kids. And we have lessons with different topics, so turnkey class sequences. And then we have a last part that we called We Act, with detailed projects. So for that lesson plan, we had 3 detailed ones, and for the new one coming, we have, I think, 10. So it's example of project that other schools have been doing. So everything has been tested in the classroom. So the teachers' feedback is very important for us, and we have a large group of teachers involved into the OCE work who give feedback on what we're doing. And this lesson plan has been translated into 4 languages as well: French, English, German, and Spanish. On top of this lesson plan, we have a number of different resources that can be used by themselves, or they can be used as a complement to these sequences. We have professional development resources that are more for teachers, trainers who wants to do a workshop with teachers, developing, for example, experiments. The one on the left is the one on the albedo, showing why the melting of the sea ice in the Arctic is not impacting sea level rise, but is impacting the temperature of the ocean through the change of color. We have a number of videos where we have experts, or we have scientists, or just testimonies, someone that wants to talk about a particular topic. So here we had, for example, a researcher from Météo France talking about the urban heat island effects. We have a number of multimedia animations too. Here you have an example of the sea level rise aspect. So through different kind of IPCC scenarios, showing the maps and showing which area might be flooded. And the last one on the, we have a number of them, like on the biodiversity aspects, how the food webs change and how it's related to climate change. Here is an example of a resource that is from our lesson plan, showing how it's organized. So you have an introduction showing the teacher very quickly how long it's going to take, which material do they need, what they need to know before, what are the objectives of the sequence, the keywords, the inquiry methods that will be used. Some tips for the teachers, some photos of whether the experiments or of the classroom as well, showing them, okay, this is exactly what it might look like. It really helps teachers. And then some work document that I can distribute in the classroom. So that lesson was on melting cryosphere and sea level rise, and was still linked to that ocean and cryosphere topic. So what we're doing now, we work very closely with our network and our partners, and actually our work would not be efficient if they were not here, because something we really figure out is the adaptation of all we're doing that is really important. I've been doing teachers training, for example, in Indonesia, and when you get there and you explain through different kind of actions, for example, or solutions, you really have to take into account the contextual aspects to make sure your speech and what you're offering is relevant for them. And we have a very large project in South America called APECS, and our partners there in Mexico and Colombia adapted all the lesson plan we produced on ocean and cryosphere to their context, through their own examples, offering projects that have been following in the classroom there. So this is a very strong aspect of our work, and it's really something we want to develop in the future. Then I haven't mentioned it here, but we also are working on a MOOC. Because of the COVID situation, we figured out that these 2 last year we really need to offer the teachers online training. That's something that is very easy for them. They can, at the end of the day, follow on our course and do that over the year. Our MOOC will develop the very general aspect of climate change in the first part, and we use the same kind of pedagogy. So the idea for them is to first test the lesson we want them to do then in the classroom, and also to create a kind of community with teachers that are following the same training, are able to share the good practices, their ideas, their project, their feedbacks from the student, etc. Then we are now finishing our work on a new topic that is land use and climate change, still related to the IPCC. And we produce the same kind of resources, so a summary for teachers from the IPCC reports, a lesson plan, some video animation, etc. And that might be released over the coming months. The English version may be ready in 3 or 4 months' time, and then everything will be translated. We still are doing local teacher professional development action. My colleagues this week are actually in Mexico to do so. And yeah, the last one will be adapted. The land use aspect will be adapted by Mexican and Colombian context very soon. Something I wanted to offer you, but maybe we can do that during the break and keep the few remaining minutes for the questions. But if you want to test one of our resources, I think that one might be interesting. It's a carbon footprint resource. I did put the link on top. You have it in Spanish and in English. And we produce that carbon footprint in order to work on the solution aspect. We thought it was a good way to start the discussion about our emission, our impact, with teachers, but also with the students, by doing a kind of first overview of where our emissions are coming from in our everyday lives, because we don't always know, it's not always easy to access. So we made a very simplified version. It's quite detailed. There are a lot of questions. Actually, it takes 10 or 15 minutes to answer all of them, but it gives you a very good idea, and it's a very nice activity because you can come back on your answer and try to change them to see how you can improve your carbon footprint. But as an example, in France, your carbon footprints can go from 6 tons of CO2 up to 10 tons per year. And in the Paris Agreement, we agreed to reduce that to 2 tons. So it means we have to reduce that by 5, which is very challenging. But yeah, it gives a context on the kind of changes we have to make. But yeah, if you want to do that over the break, or if you want to start that now, you can. But in the meantime, I can take your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lydie. Yeah, you can put your translation device, please. Preguntas, abrimos el turno de preguntas. Quienes nos sigan.
It's now time for questions, both for those of you who are here or also those of you who follow us over the streaming channel. There's a question here. Go ahead. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. I would like to know, on the one hand, I would like to know more about the pedagogical material you have developed. And also I've understood that you do training for both teachers and also for the people that train the trainers. So I would like to know how you develop this training, what are the steps you take. And I also understand that you do this online, but I would like to know if you do it face-to-face, etc. Thank you very much for your answer.
Yeah, good question. Actually, we are the one producing the resources at the OC, are also the one doing the training. Like I'm a trainer too, and yeah, it's true. We target teachers, trainers, and also teachers, but we don't train the trainers of the teacher trainers. Yeah, something like that. But for a very long time, since the beginning, we always try to have face-to-face training, because as I mentioned, if we want to be efficient, we really need to spend a lot of time, because yeah, when you work on that active pedagogic aspect, you really have to develop all the way you're thinking. And I found out that just identifying a specific question is always very, very hard. And I really like, it's a work that takes a lot of time, but just going to the precise question you want to answer and the way you can answer it is already a very nice work, but yeah, it takes time. Concerning the remote training, we have done that just during the 2 last year because of the COVID, and we found out that it's not very efficient. It's nice to give information, to give scientific information, but it's not a good way to really go deeply, especially on the pedagogical aspect. You need the person in front of you. You really need an exchange of emotions and understanding to do so. And then on the pedagogy, we're a foundation depending on La Main La Patte, and La Main La Patte has been working very strongly on the pedagogy, on that aspect, and they released a month ago an online training on the critical thinking. So we have pedagogists, researchers really dedicated to that topic who work with us and really help us understanding which kind of methods we can use. But mainly what we do is active pedagogy, so it's really the way researcher and science is working, identifying a question, what do you know, what you don't know, and how to get to the next step, how to develop an experimental, having a control one, etc. It's very science-based, but it really works well. And all the project aspects also of that kind of pedagogy. So how talking about, for example, carbon footprints in the food, and then developing in a project in a school where you will change the menu at the canteen, trying to improve that, etc. So yeah, hope it answers.
Merci beaucoup. Beste galdera bat duguan.
There's another question from the floor. Yes, good morning. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. In the example you gave us, I've seen that's very much focused on science, right? Especially on the physical aspects of the climate change. I believe there are also biological aspects. I'm sure you develop those as well. And I also would like to know more about the social aspects. Do you work on the causes, on the consequences, on the different societies? Do you work on what the keys are to be able to change all this? Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's really interesting too, and it's really in line with what we want to do, actually. When we worked on ocean and cryosphere, there are a lot of physical aspects related to that. We worked a little bit on the natural sciences aspects through, for example, the food webs. What are the consequences of the loss of the sea ice in the polar regions, for example? But it's not the core of what we've done, especially because it's just the background of the people working at the OCE today. And we need many more experts in social sciences, and it's really hard for us to reach them and to have them involved, but it's something we really want to change. The natural sciences aspect is much more important in our new lesson plan on the land use, because we work a lot on agriculture, on the functioning of the soils, on the carbon cycle. So it was easier for us to involve that aspect. But concerning social sciences, we also try to develop resources, for example, on the climate justice, developing, for example, physical debates in the classroom where you have students representing different countries and explaining their vulnerability, having different kind of emission and these kind of things. So it's something we're changing. We try to develop more and more. We have few resources, but we still want to work on that, and especially on the human rights aspect also. Yeah.
Lydie, te voy a hacer una pregunta. Es un placer.
I have a question for you, Lydie. It's a pleasure for us to have a glaciologist here. For the very beginning, the polar areas were like the thermometer of climate change, right? This is the way we see it. We citizens see things. So in order to create a bond, you need emotions, right? You need to know what the human experience of the person in front of us. Can you tell us, when you go to the Arctic and the Antarctic, how do you feel when you see all the damage we've made?
Yeah, it was really something that made a change in my life and in my pathway, and it explained also why I came from the research and I went to education, to communication. I did maybe 10 fieldwork missions in Antarctica. And in Antarctica, when I was there, it was just the beginning of the warming. I was in regions where you could not see much changes because it was in East Antarctica and that part was quite protected still. And also because the temperature are really, really low there. But in 2014, I went to the Arctic for the first time. And the Arctic is actually warming up to 3 times more intensively and rapidly than the rest of the world. And I was really shocked when I went there because I could see over 1 year or 2 year times glaciers retreating, but over hundreds of meters. Same in the mountains. I've visited few glaciers in New Zealand, for example, and I remember, first time I went there was in 2007. I could get to the front of the glacier right away, and I went 7 years later and I could not recognize the landscape. I was even wondering if I was at the right place because I could not see anything similar, and I had to walk for maybe 30 minutes to get to the front of the glacier. So in this region it's really spectacular. In Antarctica it's a bit less because it's just a colder place and warming takes a bit more time there.
Es muy frustrante ser científico.
Is it very frustrating for you to be a specialist researcher, to realize what's going on and to see that the citizens are not reacting to this?
One colleague this morning, I heard, I've seen a video this morning of the Valérie Masson-Delmotte, who is co-chair of the Group 1 of the IPCC, and she was in the French Senate yesterday talking about the last IPCC reports. And one of she was presenting the results and saying to the Senate, you also have to take into account the SDGs when you develop different laws, because it has to be a frame to see the future. And she was explaining that this kind of warming and impacts are coming really soon, and it's not just our kids' time frame, it's also ours. And as we've seen, the 1.5 degrees warming is coming very, very soon, in few years. And one member of the Senate was saying, you should not be here to give us a lesson. And I was just, was like, yeah, we need a step further, and it's really hard to get it. Yeah.
Y como última.
And my last question for you. You have told us about your pedagogical resources with experiments and different audiovisual material. It is true that there are countries on the planet that cannot have access to the material. And I guess that you adapt yourselves to each country, right? As you said with Indonesia, I guess you adapt your pedagogical resources to them.
Yeah, it's really important for the OCE to always, when we make experiments and this kind of thing, to really use very simple materials. Because even in France, it's really hard sometimes to find something or to have the budget to buy something. And for example, when we work on that experiment is very well known on the sea level rise, you can use things you have in you can use like your fridge to do that experiment. And you don't need any thermometers, you just need a pen, kind of small aquariums, few block of ice, and that's it. And that was also the idea, having everything free and using very simple experiments. And We have multimedia animation or videos, but you can download them. So if the teachers need to go to the classroom and don't have any internet connection, you can have it on its phone or its computer if they are lucky to have a computer. But yeah, that's the idea, and it's also why we don't want to produce books. We want to have a lot of things online because anyone can have it.
Pues muchísimas gracias.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Lydie. Merci beaucoup. It's been a pleasure having you here. Thank you.